So, welcome and thank you all for joining and supporting ourselves in changing times. My name is Yawande Yoyo Genevieve, and I will be your host for this event. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the live program producer at Welcome Collection. Just a bit about Welcome. Welcome Collection is a free museum and library in London that explores health and being human, making connections across science, medicine, life, and art. Almost 2 weeks ago, we opened our doors to visitors for the first time since March. So if you can, we would love to see you for a visit. If not, you can check out our stories, books, and live events online at welcomecollection.org. So I'm very excited to have you all join us for another event in the Take Care online event series, conceived by my colleague Felicity Crenson and I. Take Care looks to discuss and share strategies for mental health care and well-being during and emerging from the pandemic. During this testing time of uncertainty, lockdown, increased vulnerability to marginalized communities, enacting care and support around our mental well-being feels more pertinent than ever. Collaborating with a fantastic selection of artists, writers, and reflecting on objects in the Welcome Collection, this program makes space for supportive discussions around alternative practices of care and asks how can we re-envision how we look after ourselves and one another. So we're really grateful to have this opportunity to listen in to what we believe will be a powerful and reflective conversation between Rianna Walcott and Cheryl Martin about mental health, care, and personal care practices during this time. Just a bit about this conversation. Today's conversation was inspired by the Friendship Bench, an initiative created in Zimbabwe that currently sits in the Being Human Gallery at the Welcome Collection. We wanted to highlight the importance of communal care and holding on to safer spaces for conversations about mental health, care, and perspectives shared within it. Just to make you aware, this event is being recorded. So before handing over to our speakers, I'm just going to do my best to briefly run through today's schedule. And hopefully it'll be brief enough and let you know how we're going to run today's event. This afternoon's event will be BSL interpreted by our wonderful interpreters Dion and Jackie. There will only be one interpreter visible on screen, with Jackie and Dion interchanging every 15 minutes. Jackie, as you can see now, is on screen. We will also have live speak to text, which is being provided by Stage Text. This can be accessed via a link shared in the chat box now. When you click the link, a new tab will open up in your browser, and you can follow the live captioning there. You can change the font size, and color background as needed. Today's event is an hour long. Rianna and Cheryl will be in conversation for around 40 minutes before opening up to audience questions at 1:45 for about 10-15 minutes, to which I will come back on screen to facilitate. Just a bit about how you can engage on this platform. I hope this is an interactive event and it gives us an opportunity for us to reflect on the subject raised and Cheryl and Rihanna's conversation. There is a live chat through which you can discuss the speakers' conversations throughout. If you have any questions for the speakers, you can submit your questions via the Q&A button. I'm hoping it's on this side, which you can be found on my right-hand side of your browser. The Q&A button will be open throughout to add your questions. So during the conversation, please do think about anything you want to ask them. If you submit the question in advance, we'll also have that on hand to pick from. For this event, your cameras and microphones will be off, but hopefully you can see, hear us, or follow this event. Just to help ensure that everybody can have a positive experience and this is a safer space for people to share their ideas and questions, we expect everybody to take responsibility for their conduct and behaviour. Offensive language and behaviour which may cause harm will not be tolerated. This includes language that is racist, ableist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, abusive, religious, and culturally offensive. If you share content or use language that is offensive, if it's severe or repeated, despite receiving warning, you will be asked to leave. We'll be actively moderating the event chat to ensure a safer online environment is maintained for everybody involved. So please communicate respectfully and follow the guidelines which have also been shared in the chat box. Thank you for your cooperation. Just to let you know, we have moderators in the room supporting this event, which is colleagues from Welcome. A lot of them will be clearly identified with stars by their names. So if you're struggling with the platform, have a question or need some support, please comment in the chat box and our moderators will get in touch. You also have the ability to get in contact with them directly. So, run through now done. It is a pleasure and a delight to introduce today's speakers, Rianna and Cheryl, two powerful writers, accomplished practitioners and performers who in their own ways place honesty, the personal and care in the heart of their work. Excited to lend their ears to a conversation that opens dialogue around what taking care means for Black women who are simultaneously dealing with the systematic inequalities, lockdown and social distancing, how can we develop new care practices that helps us embrace radical change. So to share a bit about our speakers, Cheryl Martin examines experiences most people are afraid to talk about with humor, warmth and raw honesty that draws audiences in. Her shows tour to studios as well as non-theatre spaces such as libraries, hospitals, living rooms, and prison. She has won Edinburgh Fringe first and is a co-director producer of This World Is Too Much, Transverse Theatre, and 2 Manchester Evening News Awards, one for writing and one for directing. Our second speaker, Rianna Walcott, is a PhD student, King's College London, researching Black women's identity formation in digital spaces. She co-founded Project Myopia, a website that promotes inclusivity in academia and decolonized curriculum. She has written about feminism, mental health, race, literature for a variety of publications, alongside co-editing an anthology, The Colour of Madness, about BAME mental health. So now I'll hand over the space to Rianna and Cheryl, and I hope you all enjoyed this afternoon's conversation.
Thank you so much.
So we're supposed to be talking about supporting ourselves during changing times. And I'm just wondering, what kind of ways do you find to stay sane during, or to stay well, not to use that word, during these kinds of times?
Well, I'm still working on it. I think that's like a really important part, is going to be an important part of what we talk about today. The fact that, figuring out how to stay well and happy and healthy is changing from day to day as we go through this. So for me, I guess, if we maybe come up with one of the things that's been most useful to us each, I'd say that the first thing that I did that hasn't necessarily changed my workload, but was important for my mental health, was that I changed my email signature. So now, that was important to me.
Yeah.
So now if you email me, you'll get a little pinned thing that says, please note, I'm dealing with 2 pandemics, the pandemic of COVID-19 and also globalized anti-Blackness. So please take care. Your responses might not, you might not get a response as quickly as you might expect from me, and you should also consider paying freelancers for their work if you're looking for consultancy, etc.
I think that's a really good idea. And first, yes, remind people that we actually need to be paid, since for a lot of us, all our freelance work dried up immediately as it started. And that thing about dealing with 2 pandemics, it's sort of, the pandemic of anti-Blackness is the one that a lot of people forget. I mean, even though we had the whole, a moment when it seemed like people were paying attention during the summer, Black Lives Matter and all that. But I've had to, I guess one of the ways that I've taken care of myself was that I sort of refused to talk about the whole Black Lives Matter thing, except with other Black people, Black and brown people.
Oh,
because, dealing with the defensiveness that you get a lot of times, and you just don't want to have to explain, everything from scratch. And plus people were really, I ended up facilitating a Black Lives Matter writing course in Liverpool for 3 months, and people were reliving trauma, and some of them, it was obvious that they had not talked about this stuff ever. And, and that was tough. That was really hard. And, but, trying to provide a space I think that that's something that's helped me. That helped me a lot, actually, was just that I felt like I was doing something useful for other people. And plus they were really good writers, so I really enjoyed, and I've gotten a bit more into, I mean, as Yolanda said, a lot of my solo shows, in fact, all of my solo shows have dealt with some aspect of my own traumas. So what about what it was like growing up, you know, borderline personality disorder, severely depressed, suicidal, being in asylums. And, you know, the show was funny in parts, but I would relive that every time I did it. And then I did, I don't know why, about my youngest brother who died young. And I think I thought that it would be an exorcism. But again, all I was reliving it. And that one, that show I'll never do again because that was really too much. And then my latest show, One Woman, is about why did I end up being borderline and everything else. And it also is very difficult. And so during the summer, because I'm sheltering alone, I'm diabetic and single, and it's like, I just had to tell my poor director, I can't write about that while I'm sitting by myself in this flat with no access to anybody. And so instead, I went back to writing funny stories about my family and things like that. So that's what I've done to sort of cope.
So I just want to pick up on one of the things you said about, so that moment in the summer, the resurgence of interest in Black Lives Matter, and you mentioned that you made the decision, as did I, and I think a lot of people made this decision, like unanimously, that we weren't going to talk about it with white people, that actually this was going to be a collective moment for Black people to sort of grieve, and that we were actually kind of finished with doing the whole trotting out the traumas, particularly for free. So as a result, like, I mean, obviously we know it's Black History Month now. And I don't know about you, but I've been pretty chock-a-block with events and things like that. And it's that sort of understanding how much of it, and I've been working really hard this month to make sure that my events aren't necessarily about the performing of my own traumas to a white audience. So like, if I'm going to do the whole talking about trauma and performing trauma, I kind of want to make sure that it's going to a predominantly Black audience who understand and might get something out of that communal unloading of grief. Whereas I don't know necessarily what my unloading of grief does for a non-Black audience. And whatever it does, I'm not sure I'm okay with it. So it's that sort of, how do you navigate that, for instance? I was just thinking about, because particularly with your work, that obviously has to be attention for you all the time. How have you been navigating that? You know, sharing your grief to an audience that is already, you know, being overwhelmed with images of our grief.
You know, it's interesting you said that, because I had to do Edinburgh last summer, and I took my first show about being in asylums and stuff. And there was another young Southeast Asian artist named Demi Nandra, and she said during we were both on a panel for Selena Thompson's Salt. And,
amazing!
Yeah, exactly. And she said that she felt like she was being asked to pimp her trauma by theaters, and that was all anybody was interested in. And she wanted to do something frivolous. And, you know, as soon as she said it, I recognized that. And I guess the way that I deal, like when I did it you talk about doing it for a mostly white audience. Of course, I did it in Summer Hall last August, 2019. And for every single day of the festival, just about, only 2 days off. And of course, that's a mostly white audience. But the way that I deal with it is that there were a few Black people that were in those audiences. And there was like one Black girl who came up to me afterwards, and she whispered in my ear that she was exactly like me, but she hadn't told anybody ever. And it's for that person that I do those shows. It's for those young women that are like I was when in my 20s. There was an older white woman who cried for an hour after the show. And I actually had to get on the phone and find her support systems in New York. And it's because I feel like when I'm talking about my grief, it's that somebody else recognizes it, is sort of how I deal with that. And then this, and like I said, we're talking about doing Black History Month right now. And like you, I'm chock-a-block. I'm doing loads and loads of stuff. But what I'm doing personally is different most of the time, because what I'm doing right now is like, over the summer, I wrote my very first kids short story, Celeste Sparkly Cat. And so one of the things I did was to read that and to read these poems that are part of my Native American heritage, because I'm just enough 1/8 Native American. My grandmother was half Native American. And so I read things that connected me to that heritage. And then the stuff that I've been writing, you're back. And so you're back. And the stuff I've been writing is more about connecting with my family across the Atlantic. Since I can't fly to be with them and they can't fly to be with me, we've been talking. I always talk to them a lot on the phone, but we've been talking a lot. And so that's how I'm sort of dealing with it, by writing different kinds of stuff and trying to connect. And when you were not there, I was saying the way that I deal with the grief thing is that there's always somebody in that audience who's just like I was when I was in my 20s. And the show is for them. And that's sort of how the show is for everybody, of course, but it's because I keep I keep doing it so that they can see it, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
I think I can understand that, because I so often feel like a lot of the work I do is in diversity of the curriculum, of the university, of the institution, all about making space for people who look like me. And it's exhausting and doesn't always necessarily, it often feels like reinventing the wheel, trotting out the same things over and over again, and re-traumatizing yourself in trying to explain that change needs to happen. And I suppose, I've been sort of dealing with that same tension as well, of like, at what point am I performing my pain for people who won't get it anyway and who expect to see it? So, when I'm invited to certain events where it's like, I know I remember an event at the sort of start of this month with some like various heads in my institution. And it seemed to me like what I was being called on to say in that event was just sort of, hi, I'm here, I'm Black, and this is why it's all so terrible. And to some extent, I think that definitely has its place and needed to be said in that meeting. But I was tired of saying it. I instead wanted to sort of say, okay, well, we've done 1 million of these panels now. I've been asked to say this on repeat forever and ever. Like, now let's stop sort of talking about how terrible it is for me and start doing something about it. Because sometimes I feel like that is, particularly in light of what that conversation was this summer about, Black Lives Matter, I got sort of frustrated with all the sort of demonstrative outpourings from a lot of people who weren't going to do anything about it, and then months on have not done anything about it. I was much more pleased with seeing people making donations, however problematic that was at the time. I was happier to see people doing something about it rather than just saying, oh dear, I'm white and I've never noticed how difficult this is. So that's good.
It's funny, but that is what was happening. And I agree with you. I think that the only way I can deal with this whole thing, because I've been having this conversation for 30 years, and I'm like, wow, so you noticed. But it's,
but I'm Black year round.
Yeah,
I'm noticing all year round.
Yeah, I started saying, I'm Black all day, Yeah. And I'm Black all night. When I wake up, I'm still Black. Yeah,
that's like in and out of the conversation. Absolutely.
It's like, this is not a moment for me. This is our lives. So,
Yes.
but that whole thing about, can we get something done? Can we make some actual changes? I started saying, like, there was a hashtag show your staff on Twitter, in the theater world anyway, show your staff. And what that showed was that nobody was there who could make a decision with a big budget, who could, basically get programs off the ground. And if you don't have that, then you need to have that. And, this moment, which is such a terrible moment for everybody, so much suffering, so much loss, so much economic hardship, so much grief and terrible things. But we should come out of this on the other side with a different world. It's like how I want you to accept that the world we had in January is never coming back. It's gone. It is gone. And the self that was adapted to that world, you need to readapt. You're going to have to change. And there's no point in putting back into place things that weren't right in the first place. Why reinstate structures that were so unfair? I have to believe that something will shift. That it has
to be on the other side of this, of course. I mean, I suppose, yes, definitely thinking about that more. And I have been thinking about that. Like, I think that there's so I work in digital stuff. So a lot of what I do is sort of looking at how Black people use social media, use the internet, how it works, how technology, what kind of affordances privilege us versus make things worse, that kind of stuff, right? And one of the things that I think has been so wonderful about this moment is events like this, where it's much more accessible, it's cheaper to host, you can, like, how many physical events have I gone to that have had BSL interpreters? Do you know what I mean? Like, the funds that go into making an event happen in real life can quite easily be like diverted into making digital events a lot more accessible. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm seeing that I'm already like, yes, let's keep this, versus some things that maybe we don't want to keep. What would you say are some of the practices that you've thought we should keep versus what should we bin? So thinking about that, we're not going back to that world we had in January. Where can we go to?
Well, I think, like you, this whole idea that things are so much more accessible now, and that, a lot of things that some people who are disabled or deaf and disabled have had to live with all along, suddenly the world has woken up to, it's not, I think that we need to get rid of, at least, make things physically accessible if you're going to have them at all. This idea of having things socially distanced. I mean, what I hope is that a lot of new forms, you were saying that you deal with digital stuff, and I'm like, wow, they must love you right now, because you already knew what to do. This is already your world. And and in my theater world, that whole thing about the buildings are closed, and a lot of those buildings, a lot of people didn't feel ownership of anyway. So part of what, and then I listened to a talk, in the height of the summer, where someone was talking about the top-down way that the arts are done. That the artistic director decides and everybody runs around after that, and you decide what's good for people and they come see it. And I'm like, no, I really want to get back out into the community and actually let's do the stuff there. That's how I started out, to be absolutely honest, was, running around Manchester and Liverpool and in the places where people were and taking whatever I was doing to them and, doing it in that community center. And people, a lot of the top echelons of my profession don't really value that work, but I always loved it most. And I want to get back to, and the other thing that I realized this summer, you were talking about having deeper conversations. So I've been having like deeper conversations with a lot of younger Black artists up here in Manchester. And I realized they didn't come into the Manchester I came into. When I came here, it was livable. It was so cheap to live here. You could afford to do nothing but your art, and you could still pay all your bills. And not one of them can live on their own. They're all in group houses. They're all hustling, and they're all suffering. And I'm like, one, I need to do something to get them more money, and I can get them more money and get them out into the neighborhoods and find out what people actually want to see and create the best version of that could possibly be. Because there's going to be a lot of empty shops. You can take those shops over and turn that into a venue, and that would be right in people's neighborhoods. And that's what I'm hoping to get some, to trial that. So I want to see, I want to see art actually with people who really want to see it, and and reflect people back to themselves. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. I think it would be absolutely remiss at this point not to mention a project that does intersect our interests, theatre versus technology, Fringe of Colour. I noticed that Jess Gruff is in the audience here today, but yes, do take a look at Fringe of Colour, because that is exactly the kind of initiative that is making theatre accessible to people, and really, in a way that a lot of other theatre spaces weren't quite equipped to do, quickly rose to the challenge of making, theatre accessible digitally during the pandemic.
And Fringe of Colour, I'm sorry, yeah. They had that film festival. There was a young artist who really helped me last year. Mandla Ray was part of that. And Fringe of Colour, remember I said that, I don't know if you heard, that there were some Black people at my show last year at Summer Hall at Edinburgh, and they got there because they saw it on Fringe of Colour.
Yeah, you're on that spreadsheet, I know.
and it's like, and that makes, and it does, it was a simple idea, but nobody had done it, and it's already made such a huge difference. And you're right, that's exactly the kind of thing we need to do more.
Exactly, absolutely. So I guess for me, yeah, of course, Jess, got you. So, for me, I guess, I'm reading the chat as well. For me, some of the things that I think need to have some real staying power is I think we should probably pull this back to our initial conversations about what are we as Black women doing in terms of care in this moment, our practices of care, how we are staying healthy. So I did mention, I think we've probably both leaned a lot on communities. I mean, yourself isolating alone at the start of summer, that must have been really difficult. And I know that I had a fair few friends who were also isolating on their own, such as Jess, and also another friend, another academic, Zine. And I know that in that time, it was really important for us to be doing really constant video calls. And, so with Zine, for instance, we would sometimes just have a screen on so that she could access us if she wanted to.
Wow.
That kind of thing, because we are a house that has a lot of screens. I'm isolating with my flatmate. Well, we were isolating with my flatmate, Paula, and, if we hadn't had each other, it probably would have been a lot worse. So how did you, I think most importantly, how did you stay safe and healthy in that moment where you were shielding alone?
I'm still shielding alone. And so it's been ever since. I've not been farther than my local park, which is around the corner, since March. I haven't even been to a shop. And so for me, it is those communities on screen. So for me, that's a group called Divergency, which is run by something called Word of Warning up here in Manchester. And it's like a Black performance art collective. And we just meet every week, and we don't necessarily talk about anything important. We just talk. And that's where, and like I said, got to know a lot of people a lot better, even people I've known for 20 years, out in the art community here. And then I also work for a group called Common Word, which is a Black-led NPO literature, and they're the ones who got my career started when I landed here 30 years ago. And the fact that we have to have team meetings, again, it's just like, team meetings and calling my family all the time. And that's how I've managed to keep the connection going. Some friends, at first we were doing that thing where we were watching something online, once a week in a big Zoom, and that just didn't last. It just didn't,
that had its really big cutoff point where we just stopped, didn't we?
Yeah, we just got tired of it and just stopped doing that.
At the same time.
Yeah, at the same time, yeah. But I was lucky, I'm lucky, and I've had some friends who came over and sat with me in the park. And so that human connection has definitely been really important. And other stuff I've done, it's like I started getting flowers delivered all the time to cheer me up. Yeah, it's like, it's a big deal. Mine are from Bloom and Wild.
Bloom and Wild! Ah!
It's not. Okay.
So
yeah.
Serious.
It's really nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
From Bloom and Wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Over there. And we were getting Bloom and Wild all the time. We also did patch plants. We ordered absolutely tons of plants. But at this point, we counted last night, and we now have 32 plants.
Oh my God. You're really good. Yeah, I've got the only I've got lots of little succulents, which I didn't have before.
Yeah. That's not even counting succulents and cacti.
Yeah, I mean cacti, because I water stuff till it dies. So we have, cacti, I know you can only squirt a little bit, otherwise it'll die and leave it alone.
Yeah.
So and just having, it cheered me up no end.
Definitely.
No end. I'm telling you.
And I realized that having more time at home and spending all this time at home meant that we very quickly over the lockdown period beautified our home a lot more than we had before. So suddenly we had loads more art. Suddenly we had all these plants. Suddenly we had color coded our bookshelves. You see what I mean? Like
God.
all of these things started happening to make the place like livable and cozy, and it's really transformed as a space, which I think is really important and something that I definitely want to make sure, because now we have a lot more time on our hands. Well, we did have a lot more time. Now I'm busier than ever. I'm busier than before, which is, I think, a perfect example of how if you have space, the work will rise up to meet it if you let it. And so I'm really working on, stopping. Because I think, honestly, like I'm finding myself working, all the time that you would have had to commute is now devoted to working. And I'm very bad at creating boundaries. But I want to just quickly finish up on the Bloom and Wild thing, because I don't know if you did this, but towards the start of lockdown, when everyone was so sad all the time, Paula and I started sending people flowers. So not just buying flowers for ourselves and having flowers everywhere, but also just sending our friends flowers when we felt like it. Like, hey, thinking of you. Here's a really nice flowers from Bloom and Wild. And they aren't cheap.
I've been sending different little things through the mail, that people aren't expecting. And then, they get them, and it's just a nice, I was thinking of you, and here's something small. Yeah, and it does make a difference. It makes a huge difference.
It really does. And I think it's interesting that we all started doing that at the same time, almost. Like, things got hard, and then we suddenly started, like, loving each other more, like, quite quickly, Like, obviously we've mentioned Netflix party and house party and all of that. Like, when we did, I might go, in normal circumstances, you might go quite a while without necessarily talking to your friends. But at this point, suddenly everyone, almost every night, had something going on, or, little reminders to people about, that they were loved. I think that was quite a nice thing, and something that I hope also carries on after.
No, I hope so as well. I think that, actually just appreciating people more and recognizing, who is, who's actually good for you, who nourishes you. What are the things you do that make you feel nourished? I think it's like I began to realize this isn't about people, but just about stuff I was doing before. And it's sort of when everything disappeared there for a while. And I thought, I had my big long list of books I was going to read, and I was going to sew some new clothes, and I was going to do blah, 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 blah. But I got some art, like this lovely thing behind me, and who's Krishna Sari, who's a young Black magic artist. And it's like, I see your wall. I saw your wall before, and I was like, I'm really enjoying a lot of those. But that's what nourishes you. And then I thought, if there's something I used to do and I'm not missing it right now, then maybe that's something I don't need to go back to at all. And it's like, if I'm not missing it, maybe I should not have been doing it in the first place, and let it go.
Definitely. And the friendship groups really crystallized around that point as well, didn't they? It really taught you quickly who were the people that you could not bear to not see.
Yeah. And who to cherish, who to cherish. And
one thing I've been finding very difficult is not being able to see my grandma as often. And I know that my grandma has been missing touch a lot, because I'm one of 13 grandkids. Between 12 and 16 great grandkids. I don't know. At this point, I don't know. But, so she's used to being surrounded by babies and hugged every day and so on. And I know that that's been really difficult. And I've been wondering about our elders as well.
In my family, my grandmother, I'm a lot older than you. I'm 60 myself. So
you're not. All right, sorry, continue. You're not.
I am years old. Yes, I am. And so my mother is going to be 87 in less than a month. And so and my youngest sister is like living with my mother now. They weren't before, but they are now. And it's like, I want to go home and, hug my mother. And I can't do that. And it's killing me. And then I've got friends on this side of the Atlantic. And one of them just told me that, his girlfriend's pregnant. And so the baby's going to be born. I want to see the baby when it's born. I want to go. I want to bring loads of prezzies and, have my little, little fat cheek moment.
You deserve.
And I'm just praying that things are better by the time the baby's born so that I can see the baby,
We had a baby born on the 21st night of September. That was our most recent baby birth. And then, Earth, Wind and Fire, shout out. And then after that, we've got another one due in a couple months. And there was a baby born just under a year ago that I'd never met. So when I went to my grandma's on Friday before the regulations kicked in about tier 2, because I was like, I didn't get to see you before the first lockdown, and I'm not making that mistake again. So I'm going to go and say goodbye. And then there were babies as well. And I just, it was just...
that's what feeds you, or it's part of it. I
hadn't seen a baby in years. It felt.
And just the whole barbecue. I just missed the barbecues over the summer and stuff like that. And so, part of what's getting me through it is that I'm just hoping that, maybe by this time next year, we might actually be running around the way we used to. Who knows?
Yeah.
It won't be the same world because too much will have changed. But I want to at least, if with my mask, be able to go out.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose, in that time, the passage of time is happening, which is the real shame, I suppose. But, I think that it's important that we do what we've got to do to be able to make it to that next moment, of course. So, you are shielding still. So you haven't gone, you're not doing your own shopping at this point either or anything.
everything is delivered. And
Yeah.
one of my bosses at Common Word at the beginning, when I couldn't get good deliveries, for quite a long time, he was bringing me groceries. And it's like, and to me and another person who was also shielding. And so he would do his run and, bring us food, man. And again, that's a labor of love. Didn't expect that at all. And you find out, like, who does go the extra mile. I mean, one thing I haven't mentioned that's also been cheering me up is that I run a Black Arts festival up here, which is going to be on the weekend, Black Arts. And it's been really, in the fact that I can't get out anywhere, but, I've been having to talk to the artists, and it's just great to see so many people see their work bloom. And for me, that really is an important part of what I do, and like giving a platform to a lot of younger artists. And that does make, and it sounds really whatever, but I actually really enjoy that. So that's been fun.
So we've got to switch over to a Q&A now. So thank you for ending it on that point.
Thank you.
No problem. I don't know if Yolanda's coming back to talk a little bit about this, but please do keep adding your questions into the Q&A section of the chat.
And just to explain, for the picture to look right for me, I have to sit way back from my actual desktop. So, and I'm blind, it's back, so I can't read the chat very well. But so if you want, yeah.
Don't worry, both of you. I've got you. So I will back on screen to join you for the Q&A section. Thank you so much, both of you. It was just really refreshing and poignant and really great just to hear you both speak freely and just engage with each other. So thank you for that. So we're now at the Q&A portion of the afternoon, and we've got some questions coming through. So if you don't mind, I'm just gonna run through some of the ones that have gone through and some of the ones that we have received earlier on. And I will maybe just say Cheryl first or Rihanna first and let you both answer. So one of the questions that's come through from Laura has said, what changes are you hoping for in the aftertime, specifically? You mentioned changes around accessibility, home beautification and community care and on-screen communities. What do you want to persist, and what would that look like? And maybe if Cheryl, you want to answer first, and then Rihanna afterwards.
Well, as I said, I want the increased accessibility to persist. I think that people should always think about having an online component to what they're doing, because so many more people can see it. It makes it a lot easier for me to see it, and right now that's the only way I can see anything. So it's even, self-interested to say so. What else do I want to see persist? What changes do I want to see? Because a lot of my work is in theater and in literature, I would like if instead of just virtue signaling, people would actually make real changes in the way that they run their institutions. And because there's loads and loads and loads of talented, Black, Brown, East Asian, whatever you want to call us all as a collective, there's loads of us. We're around, and we could be adding so much value to what's on offer. And it's, and in literature, it's even worse. They need to really stop doing the, lip service and actually, put the money on the table, hire people, promote them, give them platforms, push them. And then, everything, the offer will be so much more interesting and better. So why not?
Thank you, Cheryl. Rihanna?
Yes, so I completely agree with all of that. Don't think there's that much more to add. All of the things that we've mentioned about home beautification and accessibility, all really wonderful, important stuff. What I would also like to stick around is possibly the So I always think this, particularly when the attention that is so fleeting on movements like global activist movements like Black Lives Matter, I would love to see more consistent and paced attention. This summer we had, personally know, a lot of funds were donated to by a number of people. There was a lot of attention on specific funds, but I think it's important to remember that we are Black 24/7. We're doing this work 24/7, and it's not just when public interest peaks. So I would love to see sort of these. I think there's been a really great spirit of like inquisitiveness and people questioning the world that we live in, and questioning, like, even just conversations like this, where people are thinking about the fact that it is the end of the world, and what sort of new world are we birthing out of this moment? The world that we had before is no longer viable, and we've noticed some issues with it. What can we do to make it better? And I think that people are actually having that conversation very honestly and openly is something that definitely needs to stick around. We just need to get better at having it, so it doesn't just happen once a year, or in a specific month, but is something that we pay consistent attention to and care to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Black folks are for all year round, not just October.
Thank you both. Thank you both of you for that. And kind of there's a question from Advance that actually really touches in quite nicely to what you were saying earlier in thinking about new routines and kind of like supportive habits during this time. And the question asks, what supportive habits or routines have you developed during this period, and did any of them surprise you? Were they not something that you thought you would be doing in this time that's giving you that sense of joy? Could either of you share that? Rihanna, if you want to go first this time.
Okay, so I picked up a lot of habits over this time. One of them was a terrible one of like almost compulsive spending. But I guess at least the things that I'm buying for myself are things that make me really happy. And they all come as part of that home beautification thing. I'm really learning something about like, well, what is the point in all the work I'm doing if there isn't time to enjoy the spoils of it? Because I work really hard and then I don't even have time to, sit down and cook dinner or, relax and get new clothes and things like that. So I have, that's been something. Also, like, the stuff we talked about, the plants, I now regularly garden, which is lovely, a nice new change. I've been doing a lot more cooking, a lot more baking. I never was a baker before, but now I am. Things like that. A couple of things that have fallen by the wayside that I did before is probably indicative of like the fact that they don't translate quite as well to online stuff. So I'm a musician. I know you are too, Cheryl. We're both jazz singers, right?
Yeah.
So no, not able to talk to my band in the same way. Not able to rehearse or record things. That's been quite disappointing. I bought a keyboard at the start of lockdown. I've touched it maybe twice. So I'm hoping that in lockdown round 2, I'm gonna rotate my hobbies. So this time it's all gonna be about music making and art, and then everything else will fall by the wayside. I've also taken a lot more. I think I'm spending more time like actually looking at the parts of my life I want to work on. So I think a really common issue that everyone's probably finding it hard to exercise and eat well under these conditions. But I have made sure to, I'm finding that as hard as anyone, for sure. I've also been trying to make sure that I got a personal trainer. So we do like Skype training sessions every now and then. I know, right? And I also have been keeping up with my therapist, which is super important. And also another lovely thing, like now I don't have to, like, it was quite a long commute for me to get to her, but now we're doing it digitally, and that's something I really want to keep up because it's so nice to do that in your own home where you're like safe and comfortable and stuff. So that's part of the stuff. Yeah.
No, that I really hear you about the exercise and also spending too much money. Yep, snap again. And I, at the very beginning of lockdown, I bought a rowing machine, and I was really good. I was really good with that for about 3 months, and then it began to taper off. So I've just been saying I've got to get back into that for the winter, and I really want to do that. And I got like one of those collection, because of the whole not being able to shop, I got one of those meal kit things, deliveries. And so I don't usually bother to cook for myself, not much. But so I've been actually cooking. And so having to actually eat and sit down and, do the chopping and do all the cooking. And that's a nice wind down at the end of the day. And so I want to keep that going, and it means that I'm eating a lot more healthily. For me, maybe something other people should not do, but I was teetotal before lockdown. I wasn't drinking alcohol at all. And I decided to go back to the Pims and to the World Court. And I only have like 1 glass a day and not every day. But actually, at the end of the day, I am enjoying that as well. It's like you can't give up everything. And I am feeling, oh goodness, a glass of Pims or port or vodka or whatever isn't going to do me in. What else have I been doing in terms of self-care? I think that, a lot of stuff I've already said, like buying things from young artists, buying the plants. And actually, I found that having a routine and actually deciding at a certain point, you were saying that, you overwork. And I think that, like you, I got more and more busy as time went on, but I decided to cut off at a certain point of the day and nothing over the weekends. It doesn't matter how behind I am, I'm not doing it. And, catch up on old movies and, try to watch part of all the good stuff that's on telly and, that kind of thing. And then, call. And also phoning home about the politics. You can hear I was originally from the States. So I'm a British citizen. I'm still a U.S. citizen. And, heartbreaking is all you can say. And so I call home and rant, like I ranted for an hour last night. So that actually helps me feel good as well.
Thank you both. We've just got a few more questions coming in. Maybe this might be an interesting one for you, Cheryl. So I know you spoke about the shops turning empty shops into art venues. One of the questions asked, can you talk more about your project or your idea? I think it was an idea about turning empty shops into art venues. Can you just, if there's anything you can talk about on that?
Well, it was part of something called Culture Reset over the summer, which was an exercise in trying to imagine what the arts, world could look like after this coronavirus moment and after the pandemic. And of course, the pandemic's never going anywhere. So just where can the arts go? And one of the ideas that my little group came up with was about getting people, younger artists, to go into their neighborhoods, talk to people about what kind of art they want to see, take over the shops that we know are going to be empty after this. So many things have gone bust. And, fill those shops in neighborhoods with the art that people want to see. And then, I tried this idea out on a friend of mine and said, if I was going to do that, what would you want? And the first thing she said was Shakespeare. And the first thing I thought was, that is so not what I want to do. And then I thought, if you're going to ask people what kind of art they want, then you don't then get persnickety about what they tell you. So if what they want is Shakespeare, then think of how you can do that in a way that is actually new and means something to the people who are going to be in that neighborhood. So that was the idea. And I'm going to try to get like, and another thing is to empower younger artists so that they're not dependent on NPOs or theaters for money, to start helping them figure out how to get their own funding and how to just diversify your funding. So we're doing research into all of that, common word. I'm going to try to get, a pilot project done that starts looking at that. Because then you have work for the older artists, because they'll be mentoring the younger artists. The younger artists are going to be going out and actually talking to loads of people in their neighborhoods. And then they've got to curate the art that goes into those empty shops. So you're creating like jobs all the way down the line, and a whole new level of arts provision for people who right now nobody cares about really, or only pays lip service to. That's my idea anyway.
I mean, it sounds really interesting, and think about how we can occupy space and provide that space to more people and people in need and within those areas quite directly. And looking at the time now, we're going to have to start wrapping up. But there's one more question that was sent in advance that I think is a really interesting one to end the note on when we're talking about us as Black women doing work, whether it be in institutions or working communities, trying to make change, and in that work on the front line and quite visibly in what we're doing. And I wanted to ask, so what when you're doing that work and you're engaging in your different practices that's trying to create change or create visibility, who or what do you draw inspiration from that keeps you motivated and positively open to change and open to the new ideas of a new world, so to call it? Cheryl, if you want to maybe start first, or if that's okay.
For me, it's talking to the younger artists, because after all, like I said, the world that they're in is a different world from the world that I came into 30 years ago, and I can get stale. And so I need to be reminded that there are different ways of doing things. Like right now, we've got the younger artist I was talking about, Mandla Ray, who was part of Fringe of Colors Film Festival, is right now our social marketing officer for Black Gold Arts, because she knows about Instagram and how to do it. And, and she's connected to a whole world of other artists and people on the ground that I'm not connected to. And I really, and who inspires me as an artist? It's when you do see things like Fringe of Color. It's when you see people do really, really good work. Like, I'm loving Lovecraft Country on telly, which is Jordan Peele, who did Get Out, and a new version of The Twilight Zone, which is one of my childhood programs. But they're Black ones. It's just a different thing. And the fact that there are people doing loads and loads of stuff. I mean, I'm just waffling now, so I'll let Rihanna talk. But
thank you, Cheryl. Rihanna?
I guess what I would want to say is that my communities, we network laterally, which I think is so important. There are, of course, so many things that I think we mentioned earlier that can't be done when you look at the makeup of their demographics of the organizations. And I just want to tie this into the question I was just answering, actually. How can grassroots organizing become more inclusive? I think this kind of links into that. The idea that, like, when we're organizing and you're organizing from the top down, you're not necessarily going to get an organization that serves everyone equally. Like, they've mentioned that the by sex workers, for sex workers activism they're involved in is very white, which doesn't reflect the population being served. And that's like a really common problem. So you have to kind of be specific with who you're working with. I think it's important that, like, I think it's totally fine to say that, like, we're a group of Black sex workers, who are looking at the intersection of race and gender in our, for how we are being treated in our treatment, right? So, that's kind of what I talk about. Like, I think is really important. Specificity. Like, I want to talk to other Black queer people about what's going on. Not necessarily, like, I'm not necessarily cool with talking to other white students because they're not necessarily experiencing exactly what I'm experiencing. So I think working laterally, working with people who are in your set, who are, you know, in different fields and different spaces, but in general have something in common with you is so important. So I am in a number of groups with like the same names and faces because we're all early career researchers, we're all PhD students, we're all Black or POC, you know, and there's something that is in common that we don't even have to explain, that our goals are all very similar, and then because of that we're able to make more positive change. So I guess that's where I say I draw my inspiration from my friends, from my group chat, from my WhatsApp group chat. That they keep me going.
And I think that's such a beautiful note to end on. Just thinking about also what we were hoping to do with this event in terms of creating this communal sense of care and this connection of people who share similar experiences to yourself, to be in dialogue and have space and a safer space to have that dialogue. So just thank you for sharing that. And just ending now, we've just gone over slightly to 2 p.m. So thank you for everybody staying with us. Thank you so much to Rianna and Cheryl for being in conversation and lending your time as we lend our ears to listen to you both. And thank you for letting us hold space with you. It was really privileged to be in there. And thank you to everybody who's been in this chat. Thank you for spending the last hour with us. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. Sorry I didn't get around to saying all of your questions, but thank you for sharing that. And I know Rihanna's been messaging some of them back, which has been great to see that interaction. Just want to say that we have one more event still to come, the last in the series. It's on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday at 6 p.m. A Space for Rest. We will be joined by Trisha Hersey, founder of the Nat Ministries, in a guided exploration of rest as a tool for healing, communal care, and resistance. So if you're already booked, I look forward to welcoming you in the space. Thank you once again to also our brilliant interpreters, Dion and Jackie, for being in the space and helping us to BSO interpret. So also just for everybody, just to keep in touch with Welcome, check what we have going online, keep your eyes peeled for the website, for any future programs that we're going to have coming up, which I think you'll all be interested in, and to see what we have. Just thank you again to everybody, Dion and Jackie and Cheryl and Rihanna, thank you again all. And I hope everybody has a great day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us.
No, thank you for having us. Thank you so much.